Well, welcome to our first YouTube advice video. We intend to do a few of these, so keep an eye on our website for more information about further topics that we'll be covering. The purpose of this video is to give a brief overview of agricultural rent reviews, a topic very prevalent at the moment with rent reviews going on in September and October. Essentially there are two types of tenancies in the agricultural industry that you commonly come across. The first is the agricultural succession tenancy or lifetime tenancy, and the second is the more modern recent farm business tenancy that have basically been in existence since 1995. The rent review procedures for both types of tenancies are very similar in as much that both require 12 months notice before a rent review can be instigated. Both have to be agreed by the review date, otherwise the matter has to be referred to arbitration, and both usually are done on a 3-year cycle, although it is not uncommon for farm business tenancy rents to be on slightly different cycles, every 2 years perhaps, or every 4 years. There are, however, some critical differences between the two when it comes to rent reviews. The main difference is on how the rent is calculated. Under the lifetime tenancies, the rent is based on a number of things, but the key issues are comparable rents of other similar tenancies and also the profitability of farming. So if profitability of farming is going up or down, then rent reviews on traditional lifetime tenancies tend to follow that trend. Farm business tenancies, however, are much more on the open market and do not necessarily follow the fortunes of farming. Particularly at the moment, for example, we're seeing a lot of high rents for things like anaerobic digesters, growing maize for them, and a lot of potato contracts are also paying high rents. There are, however, some common misconceptions about arbitration when it comes to rent reviews. The first common one we hear is that basically people are told that they have to settle the rent by the review date, otherwise the matter will go to arbitration. That's slightly misleading. The truth of the matter is that if the matter is not settled by the review date, then the person seeking the review either has to apply for an arbitrator or ignore the rent review and let the rent carry on as it is. If they apply for an arbitrator, that simply buys the parties more time to carry on negotiating and does not necessarily mean that the matter will go all the way to arbitration. In fact, about 90, maybe even 95% of matters are rent reviews settled before going to a hearing, so it's very uncommon to actually go the full way to a hearing. A second common misconception is that rents under farm business tenancies can be used as comparables for rents under lifetime tenancies. Whilst they are relevant to a certain degree under the Act, they actually carry very little weight in terms of comparable evidence when compared to other comparables that the estate or the tenant may find on lifetime tenancies. Basically because farm business tenancies are under a completely different statutory code compared to the 1986 Act, and as mentioned before, farm business tenancies are based on open market rent, whereas Agricultural Holdings Act tenancies are on a more discrete formula based on profitability of farming. The final, or one of the other misconceptions, is the role of the farmhouse in the value of the overall rent. It is commonly declared or said that farmhouses should be perhaps rented or valued comparable to what the price of a house in the local village would make, sometimes £500, £600, £700 a month. This is not true in the role of a Agricultural Holdings Act rent review. The farmhouse has to be considered as part of the overall holding and cannot be taken out as a specific part of it. It's different for farm business tenancies, but don't be persuaded into thinking that you should be paying £1,000 a month for a farmhouse, because that is clearly not the case. So, summing up, what to be wary of if you have a rent review notice imminent and the agent's been knocking on your door seeking an increase, or if you're looking for a decrease. Well, don't be pushed into a rent review just based on comparables that you are being told about have been settled. It's quite common to be said that somebody down the road has settled at such and such pounds per acre and other farms on the estate have all settled and therefore you must settle at this rate. Don't necessarily believe that. It's well worth doing some research to find out exactly what rents have been paid in the local area before committing to a rent yourself. Don't accept irrelevant information when it comes to agreeing a rent. As mentioned before, farm business tenancy rents in the context of an Agricultural Holdings Act tenancy rent are not necessarily that relevant. They can't be completely discounted, but they don't have an awful lot of weight when it comes to a rent review. and as mentioned before again, the value of the house is something else which you should be very wary of when agreeing to. The final thing to be wary of is the pressure put on, very often put on tenants to settle, because otherwise it'll go to arbitration. As mentioned before, that is not necessarily the case. All that has to happen is that an arbitrator has to be appointed, and he can then very much sit in the background whilst the parties carry on negotiating. Finally, dealing with the question of costs, it is fair to say that arbitration can be very expensive if it goes the full way to a hearing, but a good arbitrator will do everything he can to control costs, and it's worth asking the arbitrator to take a point with controlling costs and make an issue about it. It's usually a very good idea to make an offer, a good offer early on, a fair offer early on, because the earlier you make it, as long as it's made in the right way and it's made without prejudice so the arbitrator can't see it, then the better chance the party making the offer has of getting some costs awarded in their favour if the matter goes the full way to a hearing. Don't be seen to refuse to negotiate. Don't bury your head in the sand and hope it'll all go away, because it won't. The arbitrator can, in theory, carry on without your cooperation if you refuse to even engage in discussions. And if you are seen to be awkward or not prepared to even talk about the rent, then that can count against you when it comes to costs. And finally, it's always worth taking advice, whether it's through the Tenant Farmers Association, the local union, Farmers Union Wales County Secretary, or contacting us or your local agent. It's always worth taking advice to find out exactly what the rents are doing in the area before you agree to a rent and commit yourself for another 3 years. If you'd like any further information, then please do not hesitate to contact us. Our information can be found on our website, dnpcuk.com, where you can contact any of the staff and surveyors here or in our Colwyn Bay office.